Check, check, check. Test one, two, 1, 2. I don't know. It's like actually I do know. So it's uh it's another down day in the market, and the U.S. equity markets, the S&P, Dow, and Nasdaq all hit all-time highs between February 12th and 19th of this year. 5 trading days it took for all three of them to hit all-time highs. The median trading date was Valentine's Day, and 2020 is the 700th anniversary of the completion of Dante's Divine Comedy. Um, and because it was written for a woman that he only met 2 times in his life, uh, um, how do I say this? Without knowing it, I, with a different woman that I had only met a few times in my life, kind of had the same thing happen. And not obviously with, you know, all the imagery of Dante's Divine Comedy, but with the journey from a dark wood, which is the beginning uh, of his work, to paradise. And as he took that journey, I, 700 years later, or beginning in 2017, so 697 years later, began my journey, which culminated as I went to publish the book. And my book, it's called Deal of the Millennium, is a direct uh, alternative to the Trump Kushner peace plan. Now, you may not even think it matters, or you may not even give a shit that the Trump administration wrote a Mideast peace plan. But there's this guy, or they're not guy, but there's this um, being uh, who we can call the God of Abraham. So he's the God of the Muslims and Christians and Jews. And when you desecrate the holy city of Jerusalem by not only writing a economic peace plan, because you know the whole concept of paradise doesn't have the concept of money in it. But anyway, you write a peace plan that's money centric, and you release it on January 28th of 2020, which is the 700th anniversary of Dante's Divine Comedy, which, by the way, was about 700 years after uh, the Prophet Muhammad wrote the Quran. You can kind of get my theme here. Anyway, so when you write a peace plan based on money, um, and there's no such thing as money in paradise, you've essentially triggered the apocalypse. Sudden destruction cometh upon you. So after they published that on January 28th, on February 14th, the Valentine's Day of the 700th anniversary of Dante's Divine Comedy, uh, I published my book, an alternative to the Trump Kushner peace plan. I got to think that even though there weren't printing presses and we don't know where where Dante or what day of the year in 1320 uh, Dante published his work. Got to think that since it was for a girl he met only 2 times, that since it's kind of like a love letter, uh, a Valentine, if you will, that if he had to choose 700 years later when he would publish a reboot, it would have happened on Valentine's Day 2020. That's already passed, and since then, markets have been in a free fall. You can look at any chart of the S&P, Dow, and Nasdaq, and you can see that all three of them peaked between February 12th and 19th, and the 14th, even though it's a 8-day period from the 12th through the 19th to 14th, because the weekend falls smack dab in the middle of 5 trading days, where the markets reached all-time high. So I'm the guy, the former Wall Street guy, who used to call in the apocalypse of the financial system. It's already written in the book that I published. That book is the follow-up or the second edition to an earlier book that was published last year on April. Well, it was published April, I think, 12th through the 14th on Amazon and iTunes. Uh, But on April 15th, when I made it free across both platforms, that's when Notre Dame burned. Uh, that's when Notre Dame burned. So the first edition Notre Dame burned, and the second edition, the fucking markets collapsed because of coronavirus. So there you go. So when you see Corona, it means crown, and that's specifically stated in the book of Revelation that there was a white, behold, there was a white horse. His rider was given a crown. His rider had a bow. He was given a crown. Well, my crown was the September 23rd, 2017. What do you call it? Once in history celestial alignment over Jerusalem that could be seen by the naked eye. So that was my crown. And now that I finished the second book and the coronavirus is flurried up, now that crown is the Corona crown, I guess. The crown, the new crown, is sort of the incentive that you can use to rest from your labors if you believe in the God of Abraham. You don't have to go to work anymore. You're just going to stop waiting on a check for $1,000 from the government anyway, because everything's going to go free by the end of July. And that little thing called the Ark of the Covenant, yeah, we got to read on that too. So that's going to be excavated by a geologist on July 20th. He seems to think it's June 20th, but that dog ain't gonna hunt. It's July 20th because it's written in the book of Revelation. You may say, why July 20th? Well, that's exactly 42 months after Donald Trump took office. So there you go. The man, the myth, the legend, who's in power, began 42 months prior to July 20th. Let's see. So ideally, it would have been optimal the moment he took office and he and Benjamin Netanyahu started concocting a strategy to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. It would have been best in retrospect, considering all the travel restrictions. You can't fly anywhere internationally. You know, you're kind of stuck at home, and a lot of people are stuck at home. If you're in Italy, you're on fucking lockdown. It would have been best to, at the beginning of 2017, when he took office, to just say, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to max out on my credit cards. I'm going to piss off from work. And I'm going to write a kick-ass story. Just doing whatever you want to do, whatever's on your bucket list. Do that, but do it with heart and record it and then write a book about it. And I did that. And that's done. And the book was published, the second edition, 2 weeks or 3 weeks after Kushner's peace plan. So now you can stack both of those fuckers side by side. And you can see the difference between Earth, which is a socioeconomic, geopolitical system that we have now, you know, with money and politics and all that stuff that obviously isn't working, because all men are brought low by this whole coronavirus thing. Anyway, that's the Earth plan, which doesn't work. And then there's the Heaven plan. And the Heaven plan's not the deal of the century, not their plan, but the deal of a millennium. So you can read that anytime you want. And I don't know, it's so great in every single fucking way. And little things like cursing or, you know, partying with like fucking, you know, whatever, in different countries, different people. I think the entire book is designed to not only teach you, you know, through an example of my story, but then for you to write your own story that I can read too, because these are the most entertaining form of media that I've ever seen. And I'm kind of stuck right now because not many people have written these. I'm kind of stuck with things like the Quran or the Bible and, you know, whatever other religious texts. Dante's Divine Comedy, Confessions, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. There's one of those tales is specific to what do you call her? The patroness saint of music. Her name is Cecilia. But anyway, so like those types of manuscripts. So now I'm hoping that other people are going to write theirs. And looking around at the world, you can sit and you can be like, I think in Revelation it says, oh, the people say, oh, have the rocks fall on us. That's our geopolitical economic system. And the rocks of those mountains, I think there's 7 of them, so it's like religion, economics, technology, politics, all the different socioeconomic constructs we have, those are all going away. And your choice is you can rely on what's earthly, those socioeconomic constructs. And in Revelation it says, uh, people were like, "Oh, the rocks, the mountains fall on us and hide us from the wrath of the Lamb and from the face of Him who sit on the throne." Uh, what that means is any sort of hope that you have in a man-made geopolitical, socioeconomic system of, we can call them families, the family of your political family, your church family, your work family, your school family, all those families are going to wail. They're wailing now because they don't have any solutions. And the idea is that in Revelation it says, "Oh, rocks fall on us of these mountains." It means the earthly system, you're hoping that something kicks in and solves the problem. Nothing's going to solve the problem. And that's not meant as a threat. What it's meant to do is to show you that the only thing that's going to solve the problem is reading this book, just the first reboot story, and now you can write your own story next. The issue with your story is you have travel restrictions, so you're going to have to really believe in your story in order to tell it as it's been pre-planned since creation. Your story has been pre-planned since creation. And um, anyway, so if you can't tell the story due to a man-made restraint, like a travel restriction, then you're never going to fulfill your role, your perfect role and storyline here, uh, you know, on whatever, your journey from earth to heaven or paradise. So that said, you're going to have to make some decisions. Or you can ignore this video, in which case you're just going to be looking for some earthly rock to fall and hide you from the only exercise that's going to bring you true happiness, which is to write down your own comedy of your life to show me and the rest of the world who you actually were going into the apocalypse and how you transitioned from whatever thinking you had humbly, just like I did. And it's documented in a book that shows all the ways that I humiliate myself and correct myself in order to get to this point. So you can write your own book, and if it's worthy, God will show you His face. I've already seen God's face. I don't have to do it again. And that's the prize. And when you see it, that means that you're already living forever. Not physically, like we die after we die, but then the idea is we can come back. And you, if you're written into the sort of divine blueprint of heaven, you're already living forever. You've been alive before, but there's like a memory firewall, so you can't remember anything that happened before. But now you're that same person, that same mind, dropped into a new body when you were born in whatever year, and your goal, the meaning of anyone's life, is to figure out who you were before. And in doing so, you're going to tell a story that only God knows. Whatever version of the story you have in your mind is wrong. 100%, 100% of human beings have the incorrect story, because if you had the correct story, you would have A, seen the face of God already, or B, you'd actually be God yourself, but that's not possible because there's only one God. So you don't know your story. The key is to correct into your story. And the prevailing idea is that you have to cut through all the noise in your life, from the different families we talked about to different responsibilities, all that. You can rest from all of it. Obviously, if you're like a mom who's in suck, you can't like rest from taking care of your kids. So that's why it's like woe to you, because you can't drop everything to write your own story. But if you, well, hopefully you're able to take a little break, and you already kind of are, because that's what quarantine is designed to do, is to give you time alone to think about not your own version of reality, like mine and like everyone else's, because none of us are God. They're all incorrect. how do I say this without making it sound like I'm being aggressive? Because I'm not. I'm on your side. But it's like, mm, we all think we know what the best next step for our lives is, and this process is designed to show, in a loving way, none of us knew what the heck we were doing. But some of us came closer than others. And what we're going to do as more and more people write stories and begin to see the face of God and match the mystical experience that others have had, uh, you know, we're all going to be correcting ourselves at the same time. And the key is, since God is one mind, not my mind, I'm just saying, like, think about one mind encountering all facets of reality and making active decisions on, what to arrange in our lives in order to facilitate our perfect stories. Um, when you kind of understand that, then it's about us adjusting our own minds to get in that throne mind. And the throne mind is the actual full information. God can see everything that's happening on earth, has a solution for everyone's happiness, is reading everyone's mind. And even though we may think the world works a certain way, since God, that one mind, knows exactly how the world works, the faster that you can get into that perspective. That doesn't make you God, that just gives you the perspective of God. In glimpses of that perspective is probably the best way to say it. And as you hop closer, get closer to viewing the world that way, things like coronavirus are going to make a lot of sense. It's designed to isolate, to give you time without thinking about bills, rent, stuff like that. It's basically training wheels for heaven on earth. But you got to do the work while you're in there. And if you're someone who sat around not experiencing life to its fullest over the past 3 years, now's the time to do so. And to write your own mark, your own comedy, your own stake in this world to show God without any bullshit or lies. Because when I'm watching your movie, or when anyone's seeing your, reading your book, or if you decide to film it like I did and make a movie as well, when we're watching it, we don't want to hear any bullshit. We don't want to hear any lies. We want to know who you were going into this process exactly. We want to know about your family around you, the families of the people who are related to your storyline. That doesn't mean every family will be involved, but certain ones will, or certain individuals will. And we need that whole picture so we can see how this mess, not saying anything bad about your families, but a bunch of different viewpoints that weren't looking at things from the throne of God, all transition together, heal together. And I want to see those stories because they're awesome. They're true. It's not Hollywood bullshit. It's real people taking a real journey. But the idea is you have to drop everything from before. There's no, like, the idea of, well, this is what I do and this is my relationship with so and so. All of that's in flux. It's about you correcting to get into that throne. And then you're part of the royal family. You're a son or daughter or child of God once you see his face and you know he's there. Think about that. If you actually knew for 100% fact, because you've seen God, you know that he exists. Just that idea that he's there. Then you can take your view of the world and begin to adjust it because you know he's there anytime you see things like a sickness or depression or anxiety or, a car accident or whatever it is. All that is purposeful, but we don't see it because we haven't taken the time to look at it. But once you do, it's incredible. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe this is really, how is it possible that he arranged all this? And he did, for us to find out at the same time, all be blown away and be like, oh my, like, glorious are you, God. Great and glorious are your ways. We don't know what the hell we were doing the whole time. But this is the Judgment Day piece. And it's not the scary Hollywood stuff. It's about putting you in a safe environment alone. And once you decide to give up your distractions, then you can begin working on writing your own book. And I'm telling you, whatever book you would write right now before you read mine isn't up to standard because you haven't seen his face. So whatever your story is going into it, there's going to require some adjustment. It could be a few adjustments or a lot of adjustments, depending on how close you align with not my original thinking when I started the journey of my book, but how I wind up at the end. and getting through that process. I've already absorbed it and read it. I already got it. It's like click, yep, got it. Okay, that makes sense. But it's about working through all the doubts you have along the way, correcting, acknowledging them, and coming to an understanding of what the adjustments were that you made, so you can tell us your story of adjustment too. If that makes sense. So I just wanted to update that. What else? Yeah, I mean some other stuff's going on, but mainly just watching the markets. You know, my Wall Street background. I finally pieced together that you can't go. I mean, you just can't go moneyless unless you're in the stock markets, and you can't in the stock markets until it hits an all-time. If you're going to end the stock markets, you may as well have it hit an all-time high, and then drop the bastards down to zero over a 5-month period so quickly. It's never happened before in history to stand out. That's sort of the throne thinking is, okay, well, you all had these stock markets, which God used the whole time to help us arrange, our resources and things like that. But now that we are all talking and we're all suffering from the same woes, and it's about us replacing those markets as they go from all-time highs to zero. They're going away completely. They're all going to be zero. You wish you would have sold out earlier. But as that process happens and continues to happen quickly, between now and July 20th, when we excavate the Ark of the Covenant, which is also covered in my book, it needs an announcement, and that's what this video and my channel is designed to do. So that's kind of what I got right now. Okay, so for anyone who actually stuck around this long, I may as well just reveal the Antichrist for you, and this will only take a second. So, Antichrist, they call him different things in different religions, but because we represent the God of Abraham, there's only one of them. This individual matches all Christian prophecy. Having the feet of a bear means he had bone spurs. Having speaking great things means making America great again. Let's see. I don't know. Talks like a lion, means like real confidently. All this other stuff. Oh yeah, he's in power 42 months, so you can run the clock from January 20th when Trump took office. But really, on the Muslim side, you can't solve the Antichrist unless you also fit not just the Christian scripture, which I do in my book, but also the Muslim scripture too. And they actually talk about his eye. They say every prophet in Islam says he's going to be missing an eye. Like they report that Muhammad said he's going to be missing an eye. They argue, is it the left eye, the right eye? Is it hanging out? Is there a cataract there? He's blind. He doesn't see something in one of his eyes is missing. But we don't know how that works. But once you reveal him, you understand exactly how it works because it's a divine solution. Remember, all of the ways that we're thinking about, the world, like all of our individual views of the world and God and all that stuff, there's one throne, which none of us are. But when you put yourself, or over time as you learn more about how that throne and God, this is a spiritual throne, is causing or causes divine justice. So if you do something good, rewarded, bad, and what we think we're doing good and bad may not necessarily be how that throne viewpoint views good and bad, because in order to understand the throne, you need to understand the throne's objective, and that is all written down in scripture millennia ago. But for now, the Muslims say he's going to be missing. So here's the solution, and it is Donald Trump. I'll just get that out of the way. But how do you remove someone's eye, and when do you do it? So the idea is, in every interview you've ever seen of Donald Trump, you're never going to see his eye missing until one interview, and this interview happened before he was elected president. This is from July 7th of 2016. So before he moved the temple or the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, before he took office, before all that stuff, he had this interview where he gives his most in-depth description of God as Trump understands God. And he talks about his whole platform: gay marriage, conservative judges, abortion, all the hot topics. And the idea is that as he lays them out, his eye goes missing, And you can explain exactly why his eye goes missing, because he has a hat on and the angle of light covers his eye during this interview. Like, he's shot in different locations, but the main location, he's missing his eye the whole time. And as he's speaking and offering up his understanding of Christianity or religion or whatever, also he talks about Islam and badmouths it and all that, you see his eye missing. And the function...
Beautiful golf course in Southern California. Now, I'm sure he would describe it as huge, terrific, the best. So, in the next half hour, you're going to hear Trump talk about the Bible, God, forgiveness, communion, the evangelical vote, the Supreme Court, gay marriage, his aggressive style, and so much more. We begin, though, with some faith talk. You know, Donald Trump isn't known for being a Christian who wears his faith on his sleeve. So for him to actually talk to us about the things of God is always enlightening. So you
see, I don't even have to talk or communicate or tell you my views. All I had to do was report my story, tell the truth, and you notice as he describes his platform and what I bring through my story are polar opposites. He doesn't drink, I drink. He hates abortion. I've confessed having abortions, like with other women or whatever. He's a billionaire, I'm bankrupt. He flies the Air Force One. And you can go through. We're both Fordham dropouts. We both studied economics there. I know how this guy thinks, but the list is long and it's comprehensive in the book. But for now, just see how he's giving up the most comprehensive views of God.
Is some of that conversation that took place both inside the Trump National Golf Club and outside on the 18th hole as well. Let me ask you a little bit about your popularity with evangelicals. What do you make of it? I know you're asking others to say, who knows, but what's your take on it exactly?
Well, I love them. I mean, I am one of them in a true sense. I'm Protestant, I'm Presbyterian. I've gone to communion so often, and I love going to communion. I feel it makes me feel so good and so pure.
The description is it floats like a grape. His eye. It floats like a grape.
But it makes me feel so good. And I just have
see how it's
a great
kind of
relationship.
that shadow floats.
I do so well with the evangelicals, and some people.
And what it's designed to do is for people who, you talk about these different topics. You don't know, like, well, what does God want? Like, I don't know. He can't want, and you wrestle with these things. But when you can see it all laid out, you no longer have to think about it.
Whatever you want to say, there's so many things that you can learn from it. Proverbs, the chapter, never bend to envy. I've had that thing all of my life where people are bending to envy. And they're just...
Okay, so the scripture that he's talking about, to bend to envy isn't in the Bible, but what he's talking about, and his aides clarify later, is it's a Proverbs verse that basically says there's wicked men and people are envious over wicked men. And he's saying that he has had people around him his whole life who are just bending to envy. So he is using his favorite verse is describing people envying wicked men, and he's saying that around him have been people envying him, you see. So it makes him look foolish, but it's just because he's not familiar with the Bible. Like, the reason there's a shadow over his eye is to tell us, no matter what he says, well, do the opposite, as hard as that may be for anyone, to especially if you believe his platform. It's not your fault. You believe in God and you trusted this strong delusion. But it's about you adjusting, because you're not God. I'm not God. It's about the throne. And when you see that eye covered, it makes total sense why it only happens during this interview. I will point out something else. Muslims say he'll have the letters KFR written on his forehead. And if you can outline the K. You see the font on the E? You could trace an F and just leave that bottom lip out, and then there's your R, so KFR. And what it really means is not necessarily for the letters. The focus is the KFR means deceiver, And the idea of making only America great again, or making America great again, and not the world great, that's a very myopic, short-sighted view of the world, whereas God's looking at every country. And the fact that to wear this hat, it hides his eye. Had he not worn this hat, his eye would have been seen. It's no big deal. But because he wore that hat, that's the KFR, the deceiver. The eye is shown missing at this time. Thus, the Antichrist has been revealed. Now, does he have horns and all that? No. We all know who Donald Trump is. He's the guy like when Jesus was crucified. What was the guy's name? Herod, or whoever the prefect or whatever, the ruler in Jerusalem at the time. He didn't want the whole world or system to collapse. He was just trying to, how do I say this? Crowds were pissed off. He wanted to satisfy the crowd. That's all. That's the Donald Trump role. It's like he wants to satisfy the crowd, not the truth. And the truth back in Jesus' time was Jesus was the Messiah. The truth here is this guy, he's doing the opposite of God's will. Okay? And we need that shadow to see it. If we don't have him missing his eye, and you'll never find another politician or even Donald Trump where he's missing an eye for the most intimate God interview. He gives interviews all the time, but about God specifically, this is the one where he goes most in depth, and of course he's missing an eye, if that makes sense. So there's the Antichrist revealed. I published something like on Reddit, but they didn't keep it on their Islam board. I don't know why. I guess it was more like, you can't have peace unless you reveal who the Antichrist is in Abrahamic religions. So I posted on a peace board and an Islam board, but neither of them, I think they needed them or something like that. But anyway, there's the Antichrist. The books deal with the millennium. It's on Apple Books and iTunes, or Apple Books and Amazon. If you have an iPhone, use the Apple Books version because the links will work. They won't work on the Amazon version if you have an iPhone. If you have other devices, the links will work on both. But just keep that in mind. Although I don't think you can download the Apple Books version unless you have an Apple product. Doesn't matter. The book's free. It's out there. There's the guy. Coronavirus is the thesis of the book at the end after you go through the whole story. And I just want to leave you with the never been to envy part. Never been to envy is great. So he misquoted it. It's actually from the Divine Comedy. And it's a translation. So, well, actually, maybe I'll just post another interview and go into that later. But basically, never been to any envy. It's not about wicked men. It's about us having a love in our heart that burns so sweetly that no malice or envy could ever bend our will away from that throne or away from God. And so what he did, he made a flub by misquoting the Bible, but he used Dante's Divine Comedy, a translation of it. That's what he was quoting without knowing it. And because of that, the idea of writing your own comedy is the solution to the millennial kingdom, because the only way you're going to be able to believe as much as Jesus Christ or me or Muhammad or the Muslim Messiah who's actually presented in the book is if you go through the process too. And it kind of makes past prophets more accessible. They're not as removed or exalted. Maybe, I don't know how to say this. They're not as removed from we're not as far away from them as we thought we were. Or they're not as fictional as we thought they were. This is all, we just had to see these folks as they are, as they were. So that's why I posted that video. All right, see you guys. I think about these things.